my thoughts on a spinning wheel. Machine beats that I can feel.
It's a pleasure to be here with you all. As Isaac mentioned, this is the AI Music Startups panel. So we're going to be talking about AI and music in the context of tech startups. And I myself am co-founder of a tech startup called Coordinate, and we're bringing new capabilities to music and audio products. And I'm really excited to be here with this amazing group of panelists. And so what we're going to do first is I'm going to introduce each of the panelists. We'll probably alternate between in-person and Zoom. And I'll give them a few minutes just to talk a little bit about themselves and whatever they would like to say about their work or their company as it relates to AI. And then after the introductions, we'll just have some discussion and end with a Q&A session. So that sounds good to everybody. We'll get started. So Matt Adell from Musical AI is our first panelist I want to introduce. Matt started out in the music business at age 13, working at a record store in Chicago, which sounds awesome. I believe it might have been the theme of a movie or two. He progressed from selling records to making records when he became VP of Wax Trax Records. And when he was there, he signed groundbreaking artists like the KLF, KMFDM, and Derek Carter. He founded Organico Recordings. He launched Sounds.com. He co-founded Metapop, which was later acquired by Native Instruments. He spent time at Radio Wave, Music Now, Amazon, and Napster. He was CEO of Beatport, and he oversaw the sale to SFX in 2013. And I did do all this from memory, Matt, I want you to know. And these days, he's the co-founder and COO at Musical AI. And so welcome, Matt. And I would love to just hear, kind of what's top of mind for you with regard to AI and music, especially as it relates to your work and your company.
Well, what's top of mind for me is that if we don't land in a world where licensing and payments are required for training data, that we're going to see one of the largest forced wealth redistribution in our country's history. And so what we're focused on at Musical AI is bridging that gap in between rights holders and AI companies, helping AI companies make sure that they have licensed legal data sets, helping the rights holders make sure that they have transparency and sustainability in those relationships, and making sure that the license that is agreed upon is followed. We then collect some revenue from the AI company, keep a little bit ourselves, and disperse it back to the rights holders using our patent-pending AI attribution technology.
That's fantastic. And just a quick follow-up question on the introduction. How would you sort of briefly characterize the suite of services you provide, or what does the sort of solution look like that you're providing, and who are the main sort of use cases or customers?
Sure. We effectively have customers on two sides. Rights holders, today that is primarily production music libraries because it is not currently possible to legally train on any music that has a publisher involved. But that will evolve over time. And so those rights holders store their material with us. They decide if and when they want to do a license with an AI company. We have a secure cloud service that secures the content so that the content doesn't disappear in the process of training. And then our attribution technology can be used to determine how to share a dollar among the participants in a training set. So we take an output in real time, and we can tell you based on the training data that 29% of the output was effectively created by this input. 5% of the output was influenced heavily by this input, and we get basically a collaboration report, and that's how you can share a dollar.
Wow, that's really cool. I have a feeling we'll come back to some of the details on it in Q&A, because I bet people will be interested to hear about a little bit, a level down of how that works and everything.
Great, I'll be here.
That'd be cool. Good, don't run away. Yeah. All right, let's switch to virtual. Vickie Nauman is an expert in the music licensing rights and global strategy spaces, and she's an expert especially when it comes to music and technology. She helped build one of the first services that followed DMCA rules, which is, of course, Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Her company, CrossBorderWorks, advises on gaming, emerging tech platforms, and music. She had roles at MusicNet, Sonos, 7 Digital, and KEXP. She's worked in the US and Europe and in China, and she earned a Triumph MBA, which I had to look up for this, but it's very impressive. This is a really cool global program which involves studying at multiple global universities. So she got her MBA not from one university, but from 3, the London School of Economics, NYU Stern School of Business, and HEC Paris. So that is pretty cool. I'm guessing there's not too many people who can say that. And she's currently working with innovators like Beat Saber, Oculus, Pixelinks, and Downtown Holdings. And Vickie, we're really thrilled that you can join us. So I'd love to hear just a little bit more about what's top of mind for you with regard to startups and AI and your own work and your own company.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. And I want to add a footnote that I'm also an advisor to and work very closely with Matt at Musical AI on the deal side and figuring out the business model. I think the startup landscape in music and music technology we need a really vibrant music tech startup space, and it's very challenging because music rights cost money. The music business is very counterintuitive, but it is but I think we're in a moment right now in music where we have some of the largest companies on the planet that control most of the experiences around music. Meta, Google, Apple, Spotify's small compared to these companies. And every time there's new disruptive technology, music is almost always first. And it's the digital canary in the coal mine. And part of the reason why music is always first is because there's really nothing better than music to engage with customers and to engage with fans. It immediately makes your app or your service relevant. I've been doing this for a long time, and so I've seen many, many disruptive technologies from the original back in 25 years ago, when I sound like an old lady right now because there's students in the room. But when digital disruption was first around distribution, there were a lot of companies at that time that said, copyright is impossible. We can't cope with it. We are not going to be able to do it. You need to get rid of copyright. And then we figured it out for digital downloads. And then when streaming came around, it was the same thing. Copyright is too complicated. These music rights, they're fragmented. There's publishing and performing rights and sound recording rights. We can't cope with it. We should get rid of copyright. We figured that out. It is not perfect by any means, but we did figure it out. And I see generative AI in much the same way, is that, everyone's claiming fair use and that it's impossible to figure out how to engage with intellectual property owners. And I don't believe that at all. And that's why I'm advising and working with Musical AI, because I believe that, there's absolutely a path to a legal market, and that I think generative AI and AI in the broader sense is here to stay. And we just have to figure out the right legal structures so that artists and music rights holders can get paid.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's curious how often those claims of the impracticality and impossibility of rights management are curiously aligned with the incentives of the company or people making that claim. A little suspicious. Actually, obviously not just a little suspicious, but clearly why they're making those claims. So that's great, Vickie. So nice to have you here with us.
Yeah.
All right, our next contestant, who's here in person, drawn randomly from a lottery system, Aurelius Prochazka. Good. All right. Okay. All right. No applause. I didn't get it right, but I did practice. So, but Aure is a brilliant software developer. I've just gotten to know him recently. He's been working in the field of signal processing and audio synthesis. He is the force behind AudioKit, if you're familiar with that open source library on macOS. and iOS. And he's highly regarded and widely, his software library and him are highly regarded, and the software library is widely used for building audio and music applications in Swift. And he and his co-founder, Matthew Fetcher, who, is he actually here?
He made it.
Raise your hand, Matthew. All right, he's here. Tell him what he won. Okay, this is great. Matthew is actually from Indianapolis, or lives in Indianapolis, and is at the IU Indianapolis campus. So, and Matthew and Aurelius are co-founders in a related company called AudioKit Pro. So, really cool to have them both here with us. And Aure's worked on projects that'll involve real-time audio processing and AI-driven music applications. He's built in tools that have been used by countless musicians, developers, and big-name music brands. And like most of us here, I think probably in this room, Aure earned his PhD in computational fluid dynamics and aerospace engineering from Caltech. Common. I mean, who hasn't, right? So, and he's a fellow guitar player, and he has an awesome, one-of-a-kind Kiss poster on the wall in his home, which he may choose to talk about at some point.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay, all right. So, what's top of mind for you with regard to Kiss or music and AI?
So I'm a programmer first. I don't show that stuff. This is a lot less formal than the previous presentations. So I make a lot of projects, and as you mentioned, I'm a failure at CFD. I'm a failure at business, and a failure at
Failure was not in the introduction.
at guitar. And because of that failure at guitar, I was writing ear training programs, and that led me to write software for general audio manipulation. That's what got me into working with audio processing. It's free and open source. Anyone can go and use it. But it doesn't pay the bills. So that's where startups come in. So Matthew came to me and said, hey, do you want to make some money off of this? And I said, sure. And so we developed AudioKit Pro. And in AudioKit Pro, we're making synthesizers and training apps and things for musicians to use on their phone to be better at making music or learning music. We've been on the forefront of a few technologies. And with AI, we had the first like voice-powered metronome. We had a Vision Pro headset that kind of gives you virtual perfect pitch and lets you know exactly what chords are playing just by listening to the surroundings. And we have some algorithmic music synthesis programs. So we'd like to use AI to kind of further the tech. To be honest, none of those projects paid any of the bills. So our projects that just emulate the past do a lot better, but we're still pretty bullish on figuring out how we can use these technologies to make a sustainable product and business. So using AI to improve user interfaces is one way. It's one thing on my mind, and then using it to just have a more conversational relationship with your apps instead of kind of pressing virtual buttons and turning virtual knobs.
That's great. Yeah, those both sound like really cool areas to explore further in our conversation today, maybe. Okay, thanks, Aure. Now, our last, certainly not least, panelist who's with us on Zoom, Megh Vakharia. It's good to see you again, Megh. I believe you were with us last year as well, so this is great to have you back. Megh is a creative technologist and entrepreneur who develops tools for artists and the entertainment industry. He's founder and CEO of SymphonyOS, which is an AI-driven platform that's used by over 40,000 artists, and the platform helps them target and grow their audiences. Megh has a degree in informatics from University of Washington. He previously worked at both Hulu and Sears Holdings. He was co-founder and CTO of Integral Audio. He led marketing strategies for major labels and artists like SZA and Travis Scott. And he's contributed to Grammy-nominated and platinum records. And it's really nice to have you with us, Megh. Welcome, and would love to hear, again, what's top of mind for you with regard to AI in your own work or your company's, products and services.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me here too. Definitely no PhDs or triple MBAs on my side, but I have a lot of fun little stories in music. But quick background to kind of work off what you said. I was like a, CS kid, straight tech nerd from Seattle, got really into music during the time of SoundCloud first blowing up. Really this first era when like artists could drop music without having this record label middleman in between. And I kind of did like a 180 my junior year of college where I was like, you know what? I could go to Silicon Valley or I could go to LA and work with artists. Pick the second one, moved to LA in 2016. Ended up meeting my co-founder of 10 years now. I started an agency initially helping artists, major labels with using data to actually inform their businesses the same way, tech companies do. So ended up getting to work with like crazy artists like SZA on CTRL, which was like a 5X Grammy nominated project. Travis Scott, Big Sean, at different points in time, we've been on retainer from every major label to do digital marketing. But, as it goes back to the topic at hand, AI, I've been a tech nerd the whole time, right? So I've been trying to stay up to date as technology's evolved. Obviously, the last 5 years, we've had this very interesting wave of like crypto, and like the crypto thing was a whole thing for a little bit. And then AI has been big in the last 3, 4 years. And, my experience has always been around how do you take all this data that an artist or, really any online brand today generates, right? Especially for artists, whether they're SZA or, an artist at home dropping their first song, they have so many platforms that end up generating data on their behalf. By the nature of the game, if you're an artist, you have to post on social media. So your Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, whatever, posting on there. There's all this data coming back from your audience on that side. Obviously, there's the streaming platforms now like Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, Tidal, the hundreds of DSPs out there that also generate data. Those are out there. But then for the average artist, there's also things in your tool set like link in bio and your Shopify store and your email list and all these things. And as you scale, it only gets harder and harder to manage them. And so my career has kind of been spent on like being the guy or the team that folks end up outsourcing that management to, where we got to sit in between all these data sets and kind of learn how, how do you take an artist that has a $500 marketing budget and help them disperse it in a way that maximizes their release or the rollout? How do you take an artist that has a $50,000 marketing budget and do the same thing? And obviously, it's all the same platforms you end up thinking about, just different strategies. With Symphony, though, the goal was like, all right, cool, we've been an agency for like almost a decade now. How do we build software that's self-service, that's really built for this new zeitgeist of independence and then folks like really choosing to do it on their own? And how do we build almost like, I almost call it like a HubSpot, but for this generation of artists and online businesses where all your marketing lives in one place. We track your social media, we have your link in bio, we import your email list, we help you email your fans, and we have ads in the platform. So we got up to, we now have like 100,000 artists that have signed up in the last 2 or 3 years kind of using this tech. And this year especially, I've been really deep diving like nerdy on AI. And I think for us, the next stage, and we'll dive into it more, I'm sure, but the next stage is like, cool, like we can provide execution tools to help people like run ads, build websites, track the data, all that. But the context is missing. The reason people hire an agency or go to a label is the context of all this data and what to do with it. And so we've been building out all these AI agents that are specifically in the domain of marketing. And the goal is like, all right, if we get this data point from these 4 different places, how do we do things like attribution on your marketing dollars? How do we give you a marketing plan that is verifiably data-driven to help you actually grow whatever you're putting out? So a lot of things on that front. I've been, blabbing for a little bit, but yeah, very excited to kind of dive in as we go further.
Yeah, that's great, Megh. And that sounds like a really good application of AI. And I think that leads well into maybe the first topic we could discuss on the panel, which is how are you integrating AI into your product in terms of the product you're building for your customer? I mean, Megh just talked about it a little bit. I'm curious, Matt, how are you incorporating AI into your product? Not so much saying, hey, customer, here is although that could be part of it. Hey, here's some AI you can use, but rather how are you sort of behind the scenes even or in building the product using AI?
So we ourselves are not generative model builders. We enable that for other companies, startups, legacy companies, and the big tech companies. However, we do use machine learning. My colleague, Nico, invented our attribution technology. And that is a machine learning tool that he's been working on since graduate school 15 years ago. And that is really the only touch point in which we use machine learning in our product set. Because it's interesting that because we are focused on the rights of people whose life's work is being digested by training sets, we are very choosy as a company about what tools we use as a business because we don't want to use tools that have stolen data. So we're very picky. Like Adobe has a fairly trained model for image use, we'll use that, but I won't use Dolly. There are very few tools out there that are fairly trained. And so there are limited options for integrating it. I do really like an AI tool that I won't shill for, that is for deck building. I've got I can do a pitch presentation in an hour now instead of over a few days.
That does sound like a really handy one. And I think it touches on one of the big themes in AI, in my opinion, is that how do you take all the arduous parts of your work, you don't necessarily want to get rid of the ones that are creative and fun to do, and you don't mind that they take a while, but how can you do the ones that automate the ones that are sort of take a long time and you don't particularly want to do them manually? So very interesting. Vickie, I'm curious whether it's in your own company's product or solution or in the companies you're consulting with, to the degree that you can talk about it, of course, how do you see AI being integrated or being used to build the products?
Yeah, it's a great question because, I work with a lot of gaming companies, and gaming companies have been using machine learning and artificial intelligence to optimize gaming for a really long time. This is not something new, and yet now they're all under additional scrutiny. Like one of the companies that I was working with is enormous European gaming company, and one of the major labels sent a letter saying, if you have our music, and you're using any kind of AI, you have to cease using our music or you have to cease using the AI. And they were all, spun up. And then I looked at the letter and I said, I think what they really mean is generative AI, because, a major label cannot dictate whether or not you're using machine learning to optimize gameplay in the background. But there's, one of the things that's touching almost every single company that I work with, whether it's gaming or a back-end system or some young company and a startup, is that if it touches music, there's this intense scrutiny right now that any company that is using any kind of artificial intelligence or machine learning is under a spotlight when you're going to try to clear rights and you're trying to engage with music business, because there's there's just a fear and there's a risk around, rights holders seeing that there could be something in the background that's going to analyze their music and inadvertently end up in a training model. And a really good example of this is, one of the problems in the music business is metadata, in, getting accurate metadata, the name of the song, the name of the artist, the, identifiers that show that this song has an ISWC code that is an asset. And there's all this enhanced metadata to add to music so that it has mood and tempo and type and genre and era and style. A lot of companies have gone from kind of clunky processes to AI processes to really add this enhanced metadata. That is now a huge issue, because you're not actually ingesting music for training. You are just, analyzing a song and basically creating some sort of a fingerprint or some sort of identifier that you can then attach additional metadata to. And those are becoming really, really challenging because rights holders are suspicious and they don't completely understand where these invisible lines are. And it's very difficult when you're trying to analyze someone else's systems to know, how deep can you go into their technology to actually determine whether this use of AI or machine learning is safe and this one isn't. And so this is kind of a common trend right now. And I think it's again, not dissimilar to times in the past where there have been, for instance, UGC, or there's open doors so users can get into platforms of additional scrutiny around that. But I think this is a moment in time, and that we will, we don't really have all the protocols and generally accepted ways for the music business and any companies that are using AI to interface. And I think we'll eventually get there. But right now, it's making things much more challenging to get deals across the line.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you touched on one, in my mind, one of the great opportunities, if in metadata in music, since we've lost the era of artwork and liner notes so much, it's so hard on some of the DSPs to not only find out who the musicians are that played on the track, but to find out, who produced it, where it was recorded, when it was recorded, all the things that especially us musicians and audio lovers really want to know about. That's really important information. And obviously for those of us who play on records, it's nice to have that preserved as well. And so I think that's a huge opportunity. And in some ways it would just involve turning AI loose on Wikipedia, and because a lot of the information's on there. So Aure, I'm curious, even if you are, I don't want to assume that you're not building AI into any products, but if you are, it'd be great to hear about that. But even if you're not, it'd be interesting to hear about, what maybe how you're using AI as a developer, or where you see the opportunities, or
Sure.
in that sense.
Well, so I'll talk about both those things. One is, how do you use AI as a developer? And I work in an incubator in San Francisco with a bunch of people who are at most half my age, and they really, basically they can't program. Most of them are not programmers anymore. They are creative people who can describe what they want, and they rely on Cursor to create code for them. And in general, it does a pretty good job. Sometimes it's terrible, and most of the gray beards will say, like, oh, that code that was created was terrible. But on the other hand, it works, and it's pretty good. I think AI is just going to get better. And I even think the notion that AI has to write code that looks like it came from a programmer is going to be kind of silly eventually, because all of the code just needs to work and do something. And whether it writes it in bytecode or it writes it in a Swift or Python, it doesn't really matter to us. We want to see the end results. So I'm pretty bullish on it. I don't mind that programmers aren't going to become obsolete, because I think it's never really like programming, neither did Matt. So definitely AI is infiltrating that world, and in an interesting way. As far as adding it to your projects, that's really interesting, because we do add it to our projects, but because we're open source, we do things in a way that allow other people to do the same thing. So there's a product that I've been working on that allows anyone who's built an iOS app to easily add AI into their apps, just by dropping in an import statement and putting in the user interface. And that could, we were hoping that would revolutionize a lot of apps that are gone stale. Like, a lot of indie developers would say, hey, version 2 now with AI. But what's super interesting about that is AI is not free. So all of these apps that people downloaded for $1.99, they can't really just offer AI into their apps, because then every time someone uses that app, they're going to be incurring a charge. So everything will shift to a subscription model, or has to shift to some sort of paid model. I don't think that's a bad thing, because the last 10 years has been terrible for developers in terms of how cheap people expect their apps to be, and how no one wants to subscribe to an app, even though they use it every day, because I could have got it for 99 cents in the past. So AI has ramifications in both those questions.
Yeah, and I think people in the music business can certainly commiserate about your work being devalued and sold at a very low price.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Megh, so I'm curious, about how you are using AI in your product. I know you talked about it a little bit already, but maybe just go a little deeper on that about how you've built it into your product, or you're certainly welcome to interpret it more broadly about how you've used it to build your product, or what capabilities you're giving to your users. However you'd like to, whatever direction you want to take that in, it's all fair game.
Amazing. Can I share my screen as well? Is it visible?
Yeah, I believe so. Tyler, can he make share screen?
Let me try it out real quick. Popping up?
Yeah, we can see it, Megh.
Perfect. So yeah, I just want to take a step back, right? Because I feel like this there's so many different applications of like AI, and AI as a term, obviously there's been machine learning and big data, and now it's LLMs, and there's all these different ways about applying it. I think for us, when we think about AI, right, we're thinking about how do you take all this information that we're collecting on behalf of an artist, on behalf of an online brand around their audience, and then how do you translate it, right? Because like, no, we work with a lot of artists that are like this stage, right? They're like really early on. There's like millions of kids out there like this globally in this kind of category where they have like, early stage numbers. They're not the SZAs and Travis Scotts of the world. They don't have a team. They probably don't have a label. They can't afford a marketing agency. And so for us, I think, Aure, what you're saying too, like, I think the commoditization of software is amazing because it's actually software engineers and software. What's happening to software is the same thing that software has been doing to everyone else for the first time. And so I, as someone that's worked as an engineer my whole life and also worked with artists my whole life, it's a little bit of our own, we get to swallow our own medicine a little bit, commoditize ourselves. And I think what it's going to do is going to devalue software drastically, but it's also going to give accessibility to a lot more people to these types of softwares that used to cost a lot. That's our whole thesis, right? A software like Symphony, what we kind of do is we're plugging into all these different platforms, right? And there's tools out there, right? You have like the fan-based analytics tools. We have like fully automated paid media automation across all these platforms. There's platforms out there that do this that cost $100 a month or $500 a month. We're $20 a month, right? You have like a whole link in bio layer as well, where you can like, build all these link in bios. You can, track your data all on one dashboard. There's a full CRM tool set built out where you can collect your emails. You can be able to email and text, SMS, WhatsApp your audience. This all used to be 4 different subscriptions that someone used to have. Now it's one for $20 a month. Obviously, part of it's like the cheapening of software and making it easier to distribute and cheaper, cheaper to kind of get out there. I think the second thing is like when we're thinking about AI, we're riding this almost like Moore's law for AI, where it's getting cheaper every 12 to 18 months. It's getting proportionally powerful, if not exponentially more powerful, every 12 to 18 months. So for us, we look at AI from the place of, all right, cool, like we have all this tech we built out. It's very inexpensive. But these folks might want to spend all this money or try and figure out how to actually market themselves, but they might not have any resources at hand besides the budget. They probably don't have a label like us saying, they probably don't have an agency. So for us, AI in this tool set is almost like the context layer, right? So this is like our first AI feature we dropped probably last week. It's really interesting. It's actually multi-agent. What it does is super simple, very simple domain of work, but this artist spent $30 on this campaign, and we give her all this data. This is a very common thing for a lot of folks. We give all these artists all this data, and they're like, what the hell do I do with it? Like, what does this actually mean? Like, what is CPC? You could give them all this information, top demographics and countries, and make it very pretty, very obvious to understand. But at the end of the day, these are creative people. These are not digital marketers. These are not data savvy folks a lot of the time. So this is where the AI comes in, where we're trying to build out AI almost as the interpretation layer and the execution layer of what to do next. So for her, it's like, all right, cool. Like she sees this, it's almost like an analysis of the campaign and just like 6th grade kind of language is very obvious as to what's going on, how well it's doing, what to look out for. It's still very V1. We want to continue tweaking from here. But our kind of vision is that, this AI that we're building out, it's almost like an AI companion or AI assistant to this artist. And so it's learning from every campaign she submits. It's learning from which audiences actually resonate. It's learning with which song she's putting out, Instagram posts she's putting out, and understanding what's actually resonating for this person online. And then the next stage beyond tools like this is, how do we enable fun little things? Like, why don't we just give everyone their own agency in their pocket by giving voice chat And now she can call Maestro or text Maestro or AI and be like, hey, like I'm dropping a song, I have $100, what do I do? Or like, I have, I want to go on tour, what do I do? Whatever. The beauty is not in the actual application layer, which is like, everyone's on chat. It's dead now as the interface, like everyone does it, it's very obvious. I think what's more interesting here is a context layer, where because we have all this data, all this context from discovery all the way through consumption down to someone emailing their audience and their audience eventually buying something from them. When we have all that sort of context and now we have systems that autonomously crunch it and derive conclusions from it and then derive next step opportunities from it, that's where I think for us AI gets really interesting, where step one is like the data and the tooling that just exists for execution. Now step two for us is how do we take this thing, hook up all these little AI agents and know what's going on with this artist ecosystem, and then give them real raw tools that actually help them take the next step, not just analyze the next step like we have today. I was rambling for a little bit there, but that's kind of
this is great, Megh. Yeah, I think it's I feel like one sort of element of what you just showed us, which is of course, I mean, I think probably most people understood what that was, but it was basically a back-end dashboard so an artist could see how their marketing is performing on various platforms and see stats and everything. And I think this raises a really interesting distinction. So much of what we talk about in AI and music is about the generative part, the audio production part, the creative part, where the person using it is going to have very definite, in most cases, opinions, requirements, standards that need to be met in the final product, right? But what you just showed us is a really great example of generating this report, for instance. The form, the exact wording, the layout, the presentation don't matter that much. Obviously, they matter to you guys. You want it to look good. But as a person consuming that content in the platform, mainly what I want is to understand the information, have it presented clearly. I probably don't care what the font is or the color scheme or what the exact wording is. And then being able to chat with that data verbally. So like if I'm driving to my next gig, I could actually hop on the phone and go, hey, how did that pay-per-click ad do last week? Just being able to interact like that is so powerful and has such utility and is also free from the perfection constraint that is attached to so many of our other use cases for AI. I think that's a really interesting thing you kind of brought up there. I'm curious, maybe it's not interesting to anyone else. Alan? Okay, I was just gonna say, I wonder if anyone else has any thoughts about that, or certainly counter argument if you want, but if you think of other examples in your own products or other products you use where the functionality of it is the really important part, and that is very useful to you.
I
Yes,
mean,
Vickie.
I will definitely add that I think that one of the real benefits of AI is, is artists able to manage more, like this, there's almost a myth of this DIY artist, that a DIY artist can be their own songwriter, their own producer, their own performer, their touring agent, their booking agent, their social media manager, their data manager, and then be able to also manage all of the royalties that are coming in from thousands of different points around the country, around the world. And it really truly is a myth. But I think that what Megh is talking about and some of these other platforms that are emerging are going to help make the artists who really do want to drive their own creative destiny, they don't want to sign to a label, they want to be independent. It's going to enable them to have much greater output, much better efficiency, and to really concentrate on being an artist. Because in all truth, this myth of the true DIY artist who does everything him or herself is that they're mostly artists and they want to become better artists. And if you don't have time to improve your musical craft or your songwriter, your performing, you're never going to make it as an artist, even if you're really good at social media. And so I think that there's an efficiency at the artist level. I think there's also an efficiency at the global level with music of being able to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to better collect money and get money passing through all the pipes so that it reaches the rightful owners. We have massive problems with money leakage from end users through all of these systems to artists. And so, the music business has never been one to really prioritize technical efficiency, but I feel like, this is going to be a whole new level that we can really leverage so much to make the music business just function better.
Yeah, great points, Vickie. Aure, Matt, any comments on this? No? All right. So I'm curious, and I'll since Vickie and Megh just started, I'm just going to start with you, Aure, and then maybe Matt could comment next. Well, actually, no, you kind of addressed this already, so I'll go to Matt. Matt, are there any sort of AI tools that you use, like in your own work, like the work you're doing for your company, or that you guys find useful internally that aren't
I
necessarily?
think I answered that.
Okay.
We use, there's a limited number of tools we use because we're a fairly trained.
You did mention
Yes.
that. Yeah. And I'm just curious, you mentioned that they were fairly trained, and you mentioned Adobe. I'm curious, like is there anything else you use more in like your day-to-day work? Not like building a product necessarily or creating assets, but just like stuff you're using to be more efficient in your job.
I'm doing some vibe coding myself, which is going to be a disaster. And I use Cursor. Honestly, as I'm saying this now, though, I don't know if they're fairly trained. I don't think you should steal people's work.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Aure, any other, I know you mentioned that you use Cursor and some developer tools. Anything else you use in sort of your personal life, or maybe that you've just seen and thought, oh, that would be a really useful thing, even if you haven't tried it?
No, but I'd like to talk to him about something he just
Yeah,
said.
can we listen in?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So this idea of like making sure everything that is fairly used, that to me seems really, really hard. And it also seems like it's not going to happen. That bad actors will make sure that doesn't happen. And it seems to me like we're kind of clinging on to a justice-based economy where people get fairly rewarded for their efforts, like this in the American patriotism, like you work, you get money, which has always been false. There's always been exceptions to that rule. Would you think that possibly the AI leads to a different socioeconomic strategy that rewards people for their art, and they know that it's going to get stolen, they know that it provides value, and they're given sustenance, they're given wages, they're treated like a good part of the economy.
Right. I find all this really fascinating, and I think it's entirely possible that AI is going to drive us to a place where basic standard income, what's the right word for it?
I think that's the right term. Universal
Basic income. Could be really important. I'm an idealist, but in this country, capitalism and the rich always win and the poor always get screwed. I don't anticipate that changing in my lifetime, unfortunately. In regards to your point of can we put the genie back in the bottle? I think we can in some cases and we can't in others. My gut is that copywritten media is going to be treated differently than, or copywritten music and copywritten moving pictures is going to be treated differently than text and still images in the future in terms of the right to train on that data. But historically, as Vickie pointed out, this is not the first time the entire tech industry has said, we can't compete with the rest of the world unless you let us steal all your shit. They've done this before. And we have put the genie back in the bottle. And there's a lot of terrible, terrible things that happen on the internet that are pushed to the edges of the internet. And I do believe historically we can push bad actors to the edge. Can we eliminate murder? No, but should we enforce murder laws? Yes.
Yeah, no, that's good. This is good. It actually leads in. Oh yeah, now Alan is putting you guys on the hot seat, Megh and Vickie. It wasn't me, but actually, I'm going to interject. I'm going to interject my next question because we've actually already started answering it. I think to some degree, maybe. And so you certainly addressed this debate that we were just having here, and also, or alternatively, what do you believe that may run counter to popular opinion about AI or AI tools? Yeah, so I'll leave it there. You can raise your hand, Megh or Vickie, if you'd like to go first. If not, I'll choose randomly, and it'll be Megh because he unmuted.
Uh, I think there's this, I don't know, it's really interesting, right? Because like I sit in between this very interesting space where like I'm the type of guy to read Hacker News and TechCrunch and like be in like the AI Twitter, where everyone's talking about AI. And then like other half my world is like all my homies that are like on Instagram that are artists and TikTok and that whole side of it. So I think there's like this very interesting world where like I think the tech world is like very idealistic, right? There's always idealistic views of where and how far the tech can go. So like there's this conversation of like, oh, like, we're gonna like have all these, and I would love to hear like, everyone's thoughts on this too, but like we're gonna have like, future music is dead, right? That's one conversation. The future of music is dead. We're gonna have AI artists and everyone's gonna love AI artists. And I talk to my friends who like love music and like actually go to concerts. Like I would never ever listen to AI artists, right? So it's like that's a very interesting kind of thing going on one side. The other side is like vibe coding, right? Like there's this concept of like vibe coding killing big software companies, and this concept of like vibe coding bringing in like a personal software revolution where everyone's building their own apps and not buying things off the shelf. um I think that's something that's like going to be very siloed, and it's very much siloed in this like Silicon Valley mindset of like coders and like tech culture. Outside of that, I don't think vibe coding is going to get big. I think the world's largely going to look the same actually in like 2 or 3 years, maybe not 5 or 10, but in the next 2 or 3 years, the world's not going to change that much because of AI. I think the idealism is always loud, and it's how NFTs were going to take over 3, 4 years ago. I think in 5 to 10, there's going to be very different changes because of AI, but I think industries like music, industries like film, industries like writing, industries like tech. I think tech and knowledge work is going to be the most immediately impacted by these AI changes for the next 2 to 3 years until AI as a form factor gets massively distributed in an actually meaningful way for folks, right? Like a lot of my artist friends, they don't use GPT, or they might use it just like an average consumer. They're not using any novel specific way. Very few of my friends are using AI tools like Suno to help them with their music. They're still doing things traditionally by the book. My parents are like mid 50s immigrants from India. They're using AI, right? But until they're getting AI tools and using AI tools that like meaningfully change their life, I think the future is not going to be something where like AI takes over. I think it's just a layer on top of everything we already do, versus this big takeover, massive monumental change that people and gurus want it to be. And I say this as someone just like having seen both sides, and obviously everyone has a different perspectives on it. But my perspective is that, there's going to be big changes, but like they're not going to be immediate. They're not going to be massively distributed, and they're going to be generally in very tech leaning circles. And maybe 10 years from now, we'll feel it societally.
That's
Yeah,
great. Thank you,
and-
Megh. Vickie.
And I mean, I largely agree with Megh, and I think that further, I think that kind of artist created music and AI created music, at least text to music. Now, I'm not talking about people using AI tools for mastering or AI tools for, other parts of music creation, but I think there's going to be a pulling apart of almost two separate kinds of music that are being created. And I think back to, like why do people want to get rid of copyright? Why do technologists want to get rid of copyright? The reason they want to get rid of it is because if you license music, you have to give up part of your margin. You have to give up 30%, or if you're an on-demand streaming company, you may give up 70% of your revenue and you only get to keep 30%. And that's because it's somebody else's IP. So, there's kind of a fever dream that crescendos all the time of, gosh, if we could get the benefits of music without having to hassle with it without having to pay for it. But I feel like there is something inherently human about music, and there's something inherently human about our connection to the emotions of songwriting and the going into being in a room or at a festival and seeing an artist on stage. And that, like, there was a period of time where many people didn't, consider DJs actual musicians. And we always have this kind of pendulum swinging, but what always comes out ahead is great music, artists who can perform, and artists surprising us with things that we could have never anticipated. And there is a derivative nature to almost all music. Artists are always inspired by those who have come before them. But yeah, I still bet on human created music. I still think that there's always going to be a role for it. And I think that it will, things like background music for YouTube videos. Yeah, like a little AI created electronic track with no lyrics in it. Yes, it's probably way better that that doesn't have any copyright whatsoever. But you want to go see an artist on stage at Coachella, that's a real person.
That's a great point, Vickie. I think you touched on something that is, I think might get overlooked or lost in the debate on this sometimes. And I say this fully recognizing that, people being displaced from their jobs and losing out on income is a real practical, real world concern. But 99, maybe it's a different percentage, but a very high percentage of people who engage in music, music arts, writing, the visual arts, don't make any money from it or make very little money from it. And so clearly, the motivation for putting in all the time and energy and discipline and dedication that it takes to pursue those arts, for most people who aren't making money from it, I think that tells you a lot. I mean, money is not the motivator for almost anyone. Even people who are making money in the arts are not doing it for the money. If they wanted to make money, they would do something else that was much, much easier, right? And much more assured. And so I think it doesn't in any way negate the point about, the practicality of how AI is going to impact anyone's ability to make a living. But I do think that even if no one could ever make money from music again, a lot of people would still choose to do it. Same with painting, same with writing. And so I think that's a really important point. Now, I certainly don't say that to in any way give people or companies who don't want to pay rights holders another excuse, because clearly that is wrong. In my mind, there's no question about it. So, but these are great comments. Vickie, I'm going to just come back to you because I'm curious from your perspective, maybe consulting in either outside of the music tech industry or in maybe adjacent businesses or industries, how would you contrast how we're using AI in music technology, audio technology, or the debates we're having about its use in music and audio technology with what you might be seeing in other industries or contexts? If you have any thoughts about that.
Well, I think that I think one thing that's very common across every single industry is there's an element of fear right now, because I think there's kind of a pop culture history of robots, robots taking over the world and computers being smarter than humans, and and that we're all reporting into the robots now. So there's that side. There's job loss. There's also this potential around things like medicine, of being able to use machine learning and data and be able to figure out how to connect dots on a scale that we just can't do right now. And, financial efficiency, all of this. And so I think everyone is kind of walking this razor this razor thin line on fear versus efficiency and technological progress. Um, I think that one of the big conversations that I would like to move beyond, move beyond fear is yes, there's lots of people out saying, 30% of the jobs that we have now are going to be completely eliminated. But there are going to be new jobs that are different, that are going to be around prompts and that are going to be around using artificial intelligence systems. And so I think there's some people are stirring up fear, whereas I think a lot of this is change. And I think all of our jobs are going to change. And this isn't just low level unskilled, that we're going to have robots in the warehouses, which we already have, but it's also lawyers and medicine, and there's a transformation happening that is very, very top of mind with every single industry. And I think that we have a lot of unknowns right now. And that's why I think having these kinds of conversations are really good, to pull apart where is their fear, where is their opportunity, and where is there just, change that we cannot foresee, that we all have to get a little bit more comfortable with.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. We're going to talk a little bit more, and then I believe we're going to open it up to some Q&A from the audience. So start thinking about what your questions are while still listening to the insights of our panelists. So Aure, I got a question for you. So if you think outside of software development, outside of music and audio technology, sort of outside of your sort of main things, as I understand them,
Right.
what are the what else are you seeing, or are you excited about, scared about, anything sort of stuff outside your work world that relates to AI where you think, oh, that's great, or oh, that's terrible, or both?
So you get a panel of experts in their subject and say, not in your subject. Answer this
See,
question.
the fact that it's thrown you off shows me that it's the right question.
Yes.
This is where your brilliance comes out, because you're knocked on one foot and now you're like,
We'll see.
Okay.
I think everyone is just looking to see like what would be how are they going to use AI. So one thing I'm not an expert on is like human relationships, and a lot of
I don't know why that got a laugh.
Believe it or not. So like in this incubator, there were like, it was a 30-day incubator, and people had to come up with an idea and present it in 30 days. And there were about 5 or 6 AI therapists companies. Like that was the thing that they thought, this is the best thing that we can think of that AI could possibly do, is replace a human interaction with somebody with a computer. I find that scary. On the other hand, I married a psychologist, so I think maybe a computer would have been a better choice. So
We won't dig into that one any further.
this is live stream, but is it ever going to be?
We can edit it. We can edit it out. We can edit it out. Matt, what about you? Kind of outside of your company mindset or perspective, are there any other sorts of thrilling, terrifying, anywhere in between sorts of AI things you?
My partner is an actor in Los Angeles.
Oh, well,
and
yeah.
a member of SAG, who was on strike last year, and AI training data was a big part of their concerns. If you sit in a cafe in Los Angeles and have a business conversation about AI, within 3 minutes, there's a crowd of people standing around you listening, concerned
pitchforks?
with questions.
Oh, okay.
Obviously, the studios, are really looking forward to not having to employ people. There's zero doubt in my mind that professional writers in Hollywood are using ChatGPT and other tools like that to help them with their writing now. I like the idea of AI collaboration and creativity. I'm really excited about it. My big fear, I guess, as always, is unregulated capitalism displacing people in illegal or unfair ways. I want to be really careful about talking about job loss because, one, there's been technological evolution throughout humanity's time, and we've never woken up where no one has a job. There's new jobs. And I do believe that will continue. But when coal miners lose their jobs, it's sort of been proven, like, you're not going to retrain them to be computer programmers or lawyers or what have you. It displaces people for the rest of their lives, the rest of their careers. And that's unpleasant and difficult, and I think we need to be empathetic to that. I am honestly, though, less concerned about future job loss and more about the exploitation of the past. There is zero doubt in my mind that every record you ever worked on is in the training data of a couple of the really big music generators. They're going to build $1 trillion company on your work. And that strikes me as inherently broken.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Megh, any thoughts on this? The question being, sorts of what you're excited about, what you're worried about outside of the sort of context of your company and your work with regard to AI.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, right? But I think like there's going to be a lot of like 5 to 10 years, I think, where we're gonna start seeing the real ramifications of like this tech at a massive scale. And I think what I'm really interested about, I'm Indian, my co-founder is Nigerian. I was born in India, right? My co-founder is from Nigeria. I worry about the impacts on like the globalized world beyond just the westernized world, right? Because we're all here like on our Claude and on our Anthropic and our DeepSeek and stuff like that. But what happens to like the kid coming up in India who wants to be a CS kid? And now like it's like 5 years from now and everyone's like, nah, we're not hiring for CS. We have cursor bots everywhere, right? So I think I'm really intrigued and like interested in seeing how I think like the westernized world or like the more like internet connected worlds will obviously see these like whatever fallout ends up happening from some of this knowledge work at some point becoming sort of automated. But I'm really interested in seeing what happens to like the other side of the world, right? Like how does it distribute to the next billion people that are just coming online? I think it was really interesting on one side where, and can you guys hear me? Is my screen, because my
Yeah,
screen's frozen?
we can still hear you. You're frozen, but we can still
Okay.
hear you. Yeah.
Let me keep yapping.
Go ahead.
It's interesting, right? Like in India, I came here when I was 3 to America. So like I saw the desktop age. I was in mobile. I had an iPhone and I saw that. My cousins in India, they skipped the desktop age entirely, right? They went straight mobile native. They had really cheap data, cheaper than a lot of us out here in America, to be honest. And they fully skipped and built a whole economy off their phone day one. And I wonder if something similar will happen too in this next 5 or 10 year period where, we do all the wild, risky experimentation of these little early eras out here and like more traditionally internet connected markets with things like AI. And then they finally reach these newer markets and maybe there's a different, change or different way these folks end up using AI than we're seeing out here. So I think it's more of a like food for thought or just like, something that'll be interesting to watch on my side. But I'm just really interested to see how these like larger, more newer internet economies kind of react to AI. What's exciting for me from our Symphony side, not to bring it back to Symphony, but I think what's cool with AI is that it speaks all these languages, right? They've trained these things to be multimodal input and output from different languages, different contexts, right? So I think it's gonna be really interesting too. And like for Symphony, like I want some kid in India who speaks Hindi only and doesn't know English and barely has any money to afford marketing, has like a Hindi speaking marketing assistant in their app that's as smart as, if not smarter than all the marketing assistants that existed previously, because it's been trained on all this data we've kind of compiled. Or so a kid in Nigeria, right, who's like, yo, like speaking in pidgin English to like this AI, and it comes back with something helpful. I think that's what's also going to be exciting is like the ability for all of the world's knowledge to be consolidated into one single point of entry and also spit back in anyone's language will be really interesting to kind of see how people take advantage of it.
Yeah, and not far off either, I would say. They were already there in many respects. I'm going to make one more comment and then we'll start on the Q&A. Oh, I thought, well, Vickie, I think I started with her. on this question.
No,
Oh, did you have something to add, Vickie? Please, go ahead.
yes, I would love to add something here, is that
Of
one
course. Yeah.
one fear and one excitement. What I think is so great is adding on to what Megh just said is the further democratization of music creation around the world. We're in the US, we're used to people having a DAW in their basement and a DAW in their kids' room, and in Africa and parts of Asia and, developing countries, they do, they might have a DAW in the neighborhood, or they might have a DAW that, gets passed around. But I think that there's so much musical talent in all these different pockets around the world that I love the idea that we can further bring down the cost of high quality production and tools and distribution and the creation of music, for people who just, their economy doesn't allow for the kind of resources that we have in the Western world. And not to end this conversation on a bad note, but my biggest fear of AI by a long measure is the further exacerbation of division of society. And if you think about a search engine that's trained on Fox News and Breitbart and the Murdoch empires and OANN, that could again further mimic reality, in that world, that you quickly put in a search for something and you get up a completely biased and incorrect answer, that it is going to further pull apart society into a post-truth world. And we're on the cusp of not being able to stop any of this, and not having a common belief that there is a single source of truth. And I think that this is a massive societal risk. And I already see this, the hallucinations and the incorrect information that's in just Google when you have your AI results for things. If I search on something very idiosyncratic and I know enough about it, and I can tell, no, this is wrong. What they've trained on and summarized for AI is incorrect. But it's much more convenient to look at one paragraph that's surfaced at the top of a search engine than go to 10,000 sites and decide which one is accurate. So that's my positive and negative.
Yeah, and I think it's a good reminder that the world actually consists more of our little music and audio tech bubble, huh? But I would add, maybe just to bring us slightly back from the brink on that one non-music or non-music AI related point, and then I'd like to invite during that anyone who'd like to come down and ask a question to Mike. I'm going to be ready for that in just a minute. But I recently got to know a gentleman who's spent most of his life as a quadriplegic. From late teens, an injury is sustained, and is now in his, I would say, his late 60s. And so he's spent his whole life as a quadriplegic, basically, or 2/3 or more of it. And through brain implants and artificial intelligence software, he's actually been able to regain a lot of the function in his hands. And so, that's a good example of how these tools do have incredible power for good as well. Obviously history shows us that we'll do both the good and the terrible with anything we're given, but there's a lot of good to be had as well. Tristra, speaking of talented, creative people who do all kinds of things.
Well, I wanted to bring us back to the world of business a little bit, since we have so many people on this panel who have started a company, or like Vickie has seen maybe 1,000 people start a company, and how do you have any piece of advice, hard-earned nuggets from your adventures, or even something really simple about how you're talking to investors or potential partners about AI now that might be of use to some of the IU community that may be thinking about starting a business or turning their music expertise into a tech startup?
What a fantastic question. Thank you, Tristra. Matt, would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, I got started in the internet being sort of a curator music programmer. And what I realized really quickly is most people really don't give a shit about music. And if you're going to start a music company, you need to decide, am I building something for people who create music like me, people who care deeply about music like me, or do I want to build a business that's going to be sustainable and make money?
I appreciate the
And
way you
I think that's
present this.
really important. If you're building a music product, put yourself in the shoes of a normal person who has to drive their kids to soccer practice. That woman does not need to discover 5 new bands this month. If another person launches a tool for music discovery is not a problem, except for the bands that are not getting discovered. It's a hard lesson to learn, but I think it's an important one.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's a good lesson for the bands out there.
I mean, I would love to add a little bit here.
Oh, it's
is
Vickie.
that
Sorry, I didn't know who was talking. Yes, please.
I think that Tristra's question is so good. And what I started seeing when there was a Web3, the blockchain, and then Web3, and then crypto, and then AI, is that a lot of startups kind of were chasing investment. And so they kept switching what they were good doing or what the future state of their company was going to be. Oh, we're incorporating blockchain. And we're like, well, why are you incorporating blockchain? You know, a traditional database would probably be just fine. And because it's hot with investors. And then, you know, a lot of this is happening right now with AI. And so a lot of startups are adding AI into their mix and trying to get investment money. And I think that the best advice that I could possibly give to anyone who is going to start a business, and I love talking to university campuses and students because I feel like you are the next generation entrepreneurs that are going to come up with ideas that previous generations haven't even thought of, is that the investment community, whether it's music or tech startups or music tech, it's really tough. It's really, really tough right now. And it is probably going to be tough for a while. Once you reach scale, you can usually find lots and lots of investment, but that early stage seed pre-A, that is really tough. And so the best advice that I could give any of you is as early as possible, figure out who is your customer that will pay you money for your product or your service and get to revenue, even if it's a small amount of revenue. But vet your product and your early stage with am I building something that's solving a problem, as Matt said, for soccer moms, you know, don't need to discover 5 new albums. But are you building a product or a service that is solving a problem such that someone will pay you for it? And the sooner you can get to the revenue, the better a conversation with investors because they're looking for that indicator, and the better for you so that you can take the minimal amount of investment possible.
Yeah, that's great. Vickie, is there something you'd like to add to that, Megh?
I could talk on this all day. So yeah, I've like been working for myself since I was 21, since before I graduated college. So I've only seen this side of just like being broke most of my life and like trying to figure out how to actually make something. But I think like for advice of especially like in this space, you know, it's kind of been said. I think like music creators as a customer is generally the makings of a very tough scalable business. And I've seen this myself, like, you know, obviously we run a company that has artists as customers. We just got lucky and cracked the code with like our go-to-market where we have like a lot of folks on the platform. But even for a company like ours, where we're building marketing tools for artists, like we want to go beyond just music. And, you know, I think the key learning in that I would pass on is that if you're building, besides music creation, which I think like music creation is a very different segment than like marketing tools or actualization of a career tools. But if you're building any sort of tools or technology on the side of like helping artists, right, with like growing their business, my only advice is that if you get too trapped in solving music only needs, you're gonna constrict your revenue potential. And so for us, how we approach it, just to give an analogy, is like, all right, like everything we build out in Symphony, we see it from the thesis of, every creator, every artist, and every small business of today having to do marketing in a very similar way, right? Every Instagram, or rather like every artist is posting on Instagram and TikTok the same way the local nail salon is, or local coffee shop is, or other SMBs are. And so if you're building for these types of creators, these types of audiences, my advice would be to really filter every feature idea you have through the lens of like how else can apply to other industries. Because I've seen time and time again, many companies kind of come out looking at this space, like really like artist tools, creator tools, and like it's going to be a very hard thing to raise money from if you want to build a big business. And if you want to build like a lifestyle business, a lot of opportunity. But if you want to build a big business that touches a lot of people or touches a lot of verticals, this is not the space to start in, nor is it space to build a vision in. Unfortunately, just the way the game is and how small the pie is, or how constricted the pie sometimes is.
Yeah.
But anyone that's trying to go down that path, I'm happy to connect with one as well and like give any feedback or ideas I have.
Yeah, thanks, Megh. Yeah,
I could follow up on that. To put it very bluntly, my advice to anybody starting up a company is you're going to fail. That I will 95% of the time be correct if I tell you you're going to fail. Don't do it. So first of all, don't do it. Second of all, if you are going to do it, you can go the route of doing like a bunch market study, like just make a Twitter, make a fake landing page and see if people are at all interested in your idea before you start doing any work. And if they start complaining that your product is vaporware or it's broken, then if enough people are complaining, then you have a product. On the other hand, if you just want to have a good life, like if your idea to have a startup is to have a good life, then follow your passion, do the project that you think is right to do, that's something that will be good in the world, and you'll have a good life. You'll build something you care about, and you should do that regardless if it's going to be a big money maker.
That's great, Aure. I think they make a really good point, and it reminds me of a quote that I heard from Mike Stern, the great jazz guitar player, many years ago that's always stuck with me. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, whenever he's talking to young people who are considering a life as a jazz musician, going into that and pursuing it, he always tells them, well, if you want to be a musician because you love music, don't do it, because it's a terrible way to make a living. It's a really difficult life. But he said, if you can't stand to do anything else, it's not so bad. And I think that it really applies to startups too, or whatever the thing that you're interested in is. It's not about whether other people say it's easy or you can do it. In fact, the most rewarding things are difficult. So, Isaac, are you going to take us home?
I think I am. Yeah.
Thank you to all the panelists. How about a hand for our panelists?